"Come inside, human." She said it to save his life, not expecting what came next. The control panel sparked across the crack, sputtering out like the last laugh of a dying star. Ezra squinted at the flickering screen, its half-dead readout, babbling nonsense about atmospheric pressure 20 times standard and outside temperatures equivalent to deep-frozen pizza. The probability of survival? He didn't want to read that part. "Damn it," he muttered, wiping frost off his breath mask. The whole cockpit smelled like burnt ozone and half-melted insulation. He'd probably developed an entirely new kind of lung. Cancer just by breathing in here. He kicked at the panel with a half-hearted grunt, and the ship responded with a whine that sounded suspiciously like a whimper. "Coward," he told it. Because if he was going down with this heap of junk, he'd at least have the last word. The windshield was half frozen, a lopsided star map painted in ice and cracks. Beyond it, the icy wasteland of Felnar 7 stretched endlessly like a white tablecloth some cosmic diner had abandoned. He rummaged under his seat for the emergency pack, standard issue, which meant about as reliable as a chocolate spacesuit. The beacon inside flickered, giving him a single weak bleep, then a dying sigh. "Oh, great," he said, addressing the beacon. "Even you're giving up on me. Fine, join the club." Suiting up, he cracked the hatch, immediately regretting it as a cold blast hit him like a punch from an angry yeti. He cursed under his breath, squinting into the night. The electromagnetic storm overhead played out like a psychedelic concert. Red, green, violet arcs crisscrossed the sky, warping his perception. For a brief, delirious second, he thought he saw a figure, a girl, tall, with skin the color of bruised starlight, standing on a ridge, watching him. "Yeah, right," he muttered. First, sign of hypothermia, hallucinating weirdly attractive aliens. His boots crunched through the icy crust, every step feeling like a negotiation with gravity. The wind laughed at him, shrieking through the rocks like a demented kettle. After what felt like hours, he stumbled into a small depression sheltered by jagged rock formations. A glimmer of hope sparked in his chest, light, actual honest-to-space light. He dragged himself closer. The structure was a tent, bizarrely shaped, all angles and glistening panels, like an origami spaceship. Suddenly, the flap opened, and there she was. Sapphire skin, eyes that seemed to flicker with their own private aurora. She was taller than him. Everyone seemed to be taller than him these days, and she carried a plasma spear like it was an extension of her arm. She blinked at him, eyes shifting from violet to pale blue. "You're human," she said, her voice like a challenge. Ezra tried to smile, but his lips felt like frozen hamburger meat. "Guilty as charged. I'd give you a handshake, but I think my fingers just gave up and filed for early retirement." She tilted, her head studying him as if he were some sort of amusing fungus. "The cold will kill you," she said, matter of fact. "Yeah, I kind of got that memo," Ezra croaked. "I'm like a space popsicle out here." She stared at him for another second, then sighed, a sound that suggested cosmic disappointment. "You will sleep in my tent tonight, human." He almost laughed at the absurdity. "I usually don't get that kind of invitation until the third date," he said, and immediately wondered if his frostbitten sense of humor was a bad idea. Her eyes flickered again, an unreadable expression. "Don't flatter yourself," she replied. "You'd probably die on the first date anyway." He shuffled forward, the cold creeping into his bones. "Yeah, I guess I'd hate to be an inconvenience." She rolled her eyes. He hadn't known aliens could do that, and gestured him inside. The wind howled as the flap closed behind him, sealing the tent in a hush of artificial warmth and alien spices. The tent smelled like something halfway between burnt cinnamon and overcooked algae. Ezra's nose wrinkled at the pungent swirl, but at least it was warm. Sort of. The heat generator hummed in the corner, stuttering occasionally like a dying mechanical cricket. Nava muttered something in her language. He recognized exactly none of it, but the tone suggested she was cursing him, the storm, the generator, and probably the universe itself. She rummaged through a small metal crate, pulling out what looked suspiciously like a cross between a toothbrush and a plasma cutter. Ezra raised an eyebrow. "Is that for dental hygiene, or, executing prisoners?" She shot him a flat look, one eye a brilliant green and the other a shifting blue. "It's a diagnostic tool," she said, her accent wrapping around the words, "like a coil of star silk. Your core temperature is dangerously low." "Oh, I could have told you that," he said, holding up his trembling hands. "I think I could store ice cream in my veins at this point." She ignored his joke, scanning the device over his chest with a practiced flick of her wrist. The tool beeped in protest, as if offended by his continued existence. She frowned, muttering, "Typical human resilience, like tissue paper in a monsoon." Ezra tried to grin, but his lips cracked. "Yeah, but we're charming while we die." She rolled her eyes again. "Don't flatter yourself. I've met microbes more charming than you." A burst of wind rattled the tent walls, like an angry poltergeist, and Nava's eyes shifted color, this time a wary amber. She glanced at the entrance flap, her fingers tightening on the handle of her plasma spear. Ezra followed her gaze. "What is it? Another one of those six-legged ice lizards?" "Drakes," she corrected automatically. "And no, this feels different. The electromagnetic flux is spiking like it's alive." He blinked. "You mean the storm's got a personality now? Let me guess. Supervillain monologue, evil laugh, end of the world." She didn't laugh. Instead, she sighed, which sounded suspiciously like a sigh of resignation. Felnos 7 storms sometimes manifest energy entities, creatures made of living plasma. They're usually harmless. Usually. He blinked again, slower this time. Living plasma? Like a glow stick with a bad attitude? She gave him a look that could melt titanium. More like a sunspot that's angry enough to fry your brain. "Oh, good," he said, his voice as dry as the frozen air outside. "We're not dealing with weather. We're dealing with sentient weather. That's super comforting." She grabbed another device from her crate, this one resembling a coiled snake with blinking eyes. "This is a flux stabilizer," she said. "If it comes near, it'll hopefully redirect the entity away from us." "Hopefully." Ezra laughed, a short, brittle sound. "I'm beginning to think hopefully is your people's version of a good luck charm." She hesitated, then grinned, just barely. "Something like that," she admitted. The tent rattled again, a low groan as if the wind itself were testing the seams. She moved closer to him, her hand brushing his as she adjusted the thermal shield. "Stay close," she said, voice low but firm. "If the entity breaches the tent, let me guess. Toast," he finished for her. "Exactly," she deadpanned. He couldn't help it. A small, tired laugh bubbled up in his chest. "Well, at least I'll die with an alien girl by my side. That's something." She snorted, an alien sound but definitely a snort, and shook her head. "Humans," she muttered. "Always looking for the silver lining, even when it's probably a lightning bolt." He grinned despite the cold. "That's us, the galaxy's favorite punchline." She didn't respond, but she didn't let go of his hand either. Ezra's teeth chattered like a cheap toy in a sandstorm, and every breath he took seemed to freeze halfway. To his lungs. Nava had cocooned them both beneath a tangle of furs and heat-conductive sheets, all of which smelled faintly of something between an alien spice rack and burnt rocket fuel. "You know," he managed between shivers, "if you told me my first sleepover with an alien would be this cozy, I might have signed up sooner." She groaned, an actual groan deep in her throat, and shot him a glare. "Sleep now. Humor is a waste of energy. Humor is how we humans stay alive," he shot back. "Laughter warms the soul, even if it doesn't do much for frostbite." She huffed, her eyes shifting to a pale green that he decided meant something between annoyance and grudging amusement. She pressed a small cube against his neck, and it beeped like a polite alarm clock. "Thermal stimulant," she said. It should boost your core temperature. Neat, he muttered. Any side effects, like spontaneous combustion or instant beard growth? Her lips twitched just a fraction. Maybe, or maybe you'll grow an extra head. Don't worry, humans barely use the one. They have. Ezra woke to the sound of something that sounded like a very large insect tap dancing on the outside of the tent. He blinked, disoriented, and wondered if he'd somehow wandered into a comedy club for overgrown alien crickets. Nava crouched near the entrance, fiddling with a device that pulsed softly with alien script. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes flickering a wary orange, then shifted back to cool blue. "Relax," she said, not looking at him. "It's just a storm scavenger." "A storm scavenger," he croaked, his voice still thick from sleep. "You mean like a raccoon that's decided my spleen looks tasty?" She snorted, an actual snort this time. "Think more like an electromagnetic sponge. It feeds on the charged particles left over from plasma storms. Sometimes they get curious and poke around camps." "Oh, great," he muttered. "So even the wildlife here runs on Duracells." She arched an eyebrow. "Duracell? Old Earth thing," he said. "Battery brand, really reliable. Not that you'd know, living in the future and all." She ignored his attempt at humor and focused on the device in her hand. It buzzed, then emitted a whine that reminded him uncomfortably of his old alarm clock. Ezra shifted under the furs, trying to regain feeling in his legs. "So what's the plan? We invite the scavenger in for tea and cookies, or do we hope it finds us too boring to eat?" "We stay still," she said without looking up. "They don't usually like warm bodies. They're drawn to flux residue, not biologicals." He considered that. For a moment, then grinned. "So my charming personality is safe?" She rolled her eyes again, but he noticed her lips twitch. "If your personality were a fuel source, this entire moon would be uninhabitable." He chuckled, feeling warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the heater. "Good to know." The tent rattled again as the scavenger circled, tapping with a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. Ezra imagined it with a tiny top hat and cane, ready to break into song. "Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey," he mumbled. Nava gave him a look that would have frozen the sun. "Humans," she sighed. "How did you ever get off your own planet?" He grinned. "Bad luck on the universe's part, I guess." She turned her attention back to her device. "Flux readings spiking," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Something's out there besides a scavenger. Like something friendly or something that wants to rearrange my organs." She didn't answer immediately, just pressed a few glowing symbols on the device. The whine grew louder, warbling like a terrified duck. "That bad, huh?" he asked. She gave him a flat stare. "Let's just say I wouldn't be telling jokes if I were you," he laughed. A hollow sound. "Guess it's a good thing you're here to save me from my own sense of humor." She didn't smile this time. Her hand hovered over the plasma spear, fingers flexing. "Stay behind me," she ordered. Ezra nodded, trying not to let the fear show. "You, always this bossy on a first date." She didn't even blink. "You're not that special, human," he grinned. "Story of my life." The plasma spear hummed in Nava's grip like an angry bee with a caffeine addiction. Ezra watched from the shadows of the tent, his heart pounding in a rhythm that would have impressed even the most enthusiastic drummer. "Are you sure it's not just the scavenger again?" he called out, trying for casual but landing somewhere between. Hysterical and squeaky, Nava shot him a look that could have flattened a supernova. "If it were just a scavenger, I wouldn't be holding a plasma spear like it's a dance partner, would I?" He gulped. "Fair point. I'll just stay here and be helpful. And by helpful, I mean not dying." She muttered something in her native tongue that sounded suspiciously like a curse, then inched toward the tent flap. The flux entity rippled into view, a swirling mass of light and plasma that made Ezra's eyes water. It hovered just outside, The tent, pulsing with an energy that felt alive. "It's scanning," Nava murmured. "Stay absolutely still." Ezra held his breath, every muscle in his body locked in place. The flux entity's glow danced along the seams of the tent, casting weird shadows. Finally, the glow faded, and the entity drifted off into the storm. Ezra exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and a dying accordion. "Well, that was fun. We should totally do that again sometime." She shook her head, but a small smile ghosted across her lips. "You humans, always making jokes when you should be running." "Hey," he replied. "If I didn't laugh, I'd be a puddle of panic by now." As the first hints of dawn crept across the frozen landscape, they worked together to repair the tent's systems. Ezra fumbled with the toolkit like it was made of angry bees, but Nava guided him patiently, her fingers occasionally brushing his as she showed him the right connections. "You know," he said, concentrating on a particularly stubborn wire, "you're not so bad for an alien who thinks humans are fungus." She sighed, long and dramatic. "Don't get sentimental. We have enough problems without your species infecting the place with sappy emotions." He laughed, the sound echoing oddly inside the tent. "Yeah, well, I'll try to keep the sappy to a minimum." "Do that," she said, her voice steady. But when he met her eyes, he thought he saw something softer there, a flicker of something she'd never admit. As they shared the last of her ration packs, watching the storm finally begin to clear through the tent's reinforced panels, Ezra caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Think we'll make it to sunrise?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just reached over and brushed a stray wire from his hand. "If we're lucky," she murmured, "and if you stop talking." He grinned. "No promises." She sighed again, but he caught the corner of her mouth curling. Just for a second, before the tent's shadow swallowed them both. Outside, the electromagnetic storm was finally fading, and the first rescue beacon's distant signal began to pulse on her scanner. "Looks like you might get off this frozen rock after all, human," she said, but her voice carried something that might have been disappointment. "Maybe," he said, watching her face. "But I have a feeling this isn't really goodbye." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd crashed on this impossible moon, Ezra thought he saw the beginning of something that had nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with the way her eyes softened when she thought he wasn't looking.